of that stuff.
Okay, good.
All of your intel.
All right. I can cross my legs, right? I'm not in. It's not like.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think we're
It
just.
can be comfortable. We're just about, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sort of your hands in.
Yeah.
All right. So this is great.
No.
This is a first. I've never done one of
We're-
these before.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I think we can start now.
Okay.
So everybody on Facebook Live who's joining us, thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this discussion this afternoon. I'm Cass Roussy, and with me today is Dr. Peter Selby, and Dr. Selby is the Director of Medical Education here in CAMH at Toronto, the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health. And today's topic is, like we say in the business, it's a bit of a talker. Many of you might have read or seen a study from a very well-known medical journal coming out in the last week talking about alcohol consumption, painting a kind of a message that perhaps to some of us confused us, because for many years now we're given one message one week that one drink a day is okay, and then the next message is it's not so much. And now Dr. Selby, if I got the Lancet study that came out, basically the headlines were quite alarmist. Even one drink a day is not good for you. I wonder, as a scientist, a researcher into this particular subject, do these studies irritate you?
No, I think in part why they don't irritate me is because science exists to disprove itself. It's not belief, right? We are constantly discovering. We often study the same thing because you're looking to make sure that what you found is accurate. So science progresses by always trying to find out better. So science is not. It's not a religion. It's not something that is fixed once and then you believe it for the rest of your life. It should change, and that's how science progresses. And that's why scientists are so important in society, because often things that we've come to believe need to be questioned and studied. So having said that, one also has to put this into perspective. These are large studies that look at large populations and look at risks that go with something. They're not absolute, that if you drink one drink a day, you will definitely harm.
Yes.
Right? That's what people should not walk away with. What you should walk away with is, yes, what this study shows is that for the bulk of people, if you don't drink, your risk is the lowest. But we all take risks through our life, and the question is, how much risk is an informed risk? And what's the risk to benefit ratio?
Yes.
Right? So it doesn't appear to be the health benefits that have been touted for alcohol. There are more harms than benefits to society in general. And less, the take home should be drink less and drink reasonably in situations that don't cause you harm.
Well, it seems that a lot of these studies are sending mixed messages, and of course the word is always moderation. But when it comes to alcohol consumption, what do you tell people when they go, I'm confused, can I have one drink a day or not?
So at a population level, you're going to say, if you don't drink, don't start. If you do drink, drink less. At a population level, like mass media kind of information. What I do as an addiction medicine physician and as a physician in general is I help people make that decision based on their risk. So if you have a risk of having an alcohol problem, you've been an alcoholic, then don't drink, because you will go back and it'll cause you lots of harm. Clearly, if you're pregnant, it doesn't make sense to drink alcohol. There's greater risks to you and the baby than to continue, and that can have long-lasting effects in some situations. So you don't want to take that risk. If you've got medical conditions that are caused by alcohol, like high blood pressure, like your liver disease, or you've got gastritis, or you've got depression, or you've got things that are caused by alcohol, abstention is probably a better thing, because your brain can, and your body is telling you it's not handling it.
Yeah.
If you've got early signs that the alcohol's damaging your liver, you've got fatty liver, then for you, probably not drinking at all.
As you say, you got to take case by case.
In many ways, you got to take case by case.
We're getting some people on Facebook Live who are wanting to ask you some questions here, and this one is timely. Stephen Lacroix is asking you if cannabis is better than alcohol.
Well, it depends on what you mean by cannabis is better than alcohol. If you're taking a look at, when you take a look at the harms caused by cannabis versus the harms caused by alcohol, based on the existing research, overarching evidence suggests that cannabis will likely cause less harm than alcohol. It has less addictive potential than alcohol. It's not to say that it's not addictive. Alcohol is addictive, cannabis is addictive, you'll end up with people who do get addicted. But overarching, there are some subtle differences in what cannabis will cause and alcohol will cause. You know, alcohol and psychosis that's not as well seen, whereas with cannabis you can see that. You know, but you don't get cirrhosis from smoking cannabis or using cannabis, but you do get from alcohol. So it depends on, you know, overarching. We feel that cannabis, depending on how it's used, who uses it, and how many people use it under what circumstances, you potentially could get less harm. But here's what happens. People combine cannabis and alcohol and get double the harm.
You know, as we get closer and closer to the legalization of cannabis, I'm sure you're going to get a lot more questions about that versus alcohol. You know, in the Lancet study, they were talking about how up to about 3 million people die from alcohol substance abuse. Any Canadian stats? How are we doing?
So, I mean, when we take a look at mortality from addictive substances, number one, more than alcohol and cannabis and illicit drugs combined, is actually tobacco. Tobacco roughly about, you know, 37, depending on the stats, 37 to 40,000 people a year in Canada dying from that related. Alcohol, the stats, depending on what you look at, is roughly about half that, depending on whether you count injuries and accidents. And in some situations, you know, for example, there was some controversy whether breast cancer was caused by alcohol. Now we are much more certain that yes. You know, there's a binge drinking of alcohol is much more associated with breast cancer. So there are these things that you look at the stats about mortality, and it will cause. I mean, there is an attribute. You know, if you rank them, it's not to say that alcohol. I think people should not walk away thinking alcohol is completely safe. It should be like anything else. No, it does require restrictions, because in any community where the average consumption starts going up, you start seeing harms. And you'll end up killing people younger, like in Russia that happened, right?
Yeah, we have a question from Will Gabriel. He wants to know how much alcohol intake is considered healthy.
Well, you know, based on the study, none would be considered healthy. The question is how much risk are you willing to trade off? This is that individual decision. How much risk are you willing, as an individual, willing to trade off? Roughly, we have several limits or guidelines. So from injury prevention guideline and not getting into, you know, trouble, roughly, you know, up to 3 standard drinks a day for men, up to 2 for women, and having at least a day or 2 without alcohol is probably, it reduces your risk of having injuries from it. Now, of course, if you're deliberately drink those drinks and then go climb a ladder, that's not smart, and you might hurt yourself. But if you want to get a cancer risk reduction, it's a lot less. If you want to reduce your risk of cancer from alcohol, then for women it's less than a drink a day, and for men it's less than 2 drinks a day.
It's again so individual. Skylar Sinclair. No, wait, there's one here. Thomas Hickey before that. We'll get to you, Skylar, in a few seconds. I guess Thomas wants to know what sugar level is dangerous to your health regarding diabetics. Is under 10 good? I guess because there's a lot of sugar, obviously.
Well, there's a ton of... So first of all, alcohol with or without sugar has calories, right? It's about anywhere from 120 to 160 calories per drink, depending on what you're having. And it does tend to send people's blood sugars out of whack, especially if you have diabetes. So in general, less is more, or take a look at the calories that you're getting from alcohol, because they can add up. And many of our patients, when they either reduce the alcohol consumption or stop alcohol, they lose weight just magically.
Yes.
And they say, what did that happen? I said, well, you were getting a lot of calories from alcohol. So yes, you want your blood sugars obviously less than 10. You want your something known as the 3-month measure of how your blood sugars have gone. It's called hemoglobin A1C. You know, at less than at 6 or less, and you want to see that as a standard outcome.
Skylar Sinclair asks, will moderate drinking still hurt your liver?
So this is, so we know, so moderate drinking, it depends on what we mean by moderate drinking. The biggest problem we have is people don't actually measure the drinks that they have. And nowadays, standard drinks, a standard drink has 13.6 grams of alcohol. In this one, to get it, that's in Canada. Internationally, they use 10 grams. So that equates to like an ounce of alcohol internationally, but in Canada, we serve an ounce and a half.
Oh, okay.
So when we count our drinks in Canada, and the guidelines I gave you were the Canadian levels. So it depends on how you define moderate. And I think if you drink moderately, where you're saying, I'm not crossing the guidelines, I'm having a day or two where I don't drink, and I don't drink in situations that are dangerous, then the chances are lower of developing trouble. The issue is with all of these studies, it's all about chances. It's not an absolute.
Yeah.
Medicine is always about chances. People say, well, when you take an antibiotic, it's always the chances you'll get better faster if you have a bronchitis and you've got a lung infection with the bacteria or pneumonia. The chance that you take the antibiotic, you will get better. More than if you didn't take the antibiotic. But not everybody who takes the antibiotic gets better.
Yes.
And that's part of our literacy challenge, that we need to make sure that people understand this. These are about risks, not absolutes.
It's not black and white.
It's
Every
not.
individual is different about how much you can take.
Exactly.
What's moderate for you is not so much for somebody else, of
That's
course.
right.
Brian Fitzgerald wants to know, how does one evaluate the individual risk of alcohol consumption based on one's personal health profile if one doesn't have any known health issues?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I think in part, we can look at, one of the things we know, the alcohol use disorders or alcoholism or addiction to alcohol is a genetically transmitted condition. So if you have family history, first degree, second degree, your parents, it's probably a good idea for you not to drink because you're likely to develop dependence. So that's one way to make, if you're otherwise healthy, you've got to be really careful about alcohol consumption because you could find yourself getting into trouble. And I think when you take a look at the individual risk, it's really, I say, look, if you drink in a social situation always, where the goal is to socialize, not to get intoxicated, that's a good way to think. I also say, if you're drinking alone, that's probably not a good thing. Because the whole idea of alcohol as a social lubricant, what are you lubricating if you're alone? Right? And you're not, like, what social interaction are you trying to, so then you're starting to looking at what people are using this alcohol for, and that's when harm starts happening.
I would imagine a lot of times just to relax after a hard day at work.
Well,
I don't know.
It's possible,
Yeah.
but again, when you start, because then what happens is it starts losing that effect, and now it's not the one drink. Now it's the, now I've opened the bottle of wine. Now it's not the one glass of wine. It's now all 5 glasses that are in a bottle, and now I'm buying the bigger bottle of wine.
Oh dear, you're getting into the nasty habit now.
So that's what it happens, right? So having those days where you don't make it habitual is an important way of a healthy person sort of saying, how much should I drink?
Yeah.
Generally limiting it to these levels is what I would say.
Emma McGow would like to know if the body processes calories from alcohol differently.
Not necessarily. I mean, it gives you less. Alcohol gives slightly less calories than the same amount of carbohydrate, but it still gives you the calories, and your body breaks it down into glucose. Breaks it down into carbon dioxide and water, like it metabolizes it in the same way. And there are enzymes that do that, and some of us have them and some of us don't. Especially if you're from the Southeast Asia, you tend not to have those enzymes, and so that's where you get the flushing and what have you. But from a caloric perspective, you will end up getting it. And don't forget, liquid calories punch a lot of calories because most of our other carbohydrates are through food.
Liquid
solid.
calories punch?
You get a lot more calories per glass, right? You can put in a lot more calories in a glass of alcohol.
That's true.
And then if you have to eat, right? So solid food gives you fewer calories. So your body also absorbs all those calories faster. You absorb alcohol fairly quickly. From the upper part of the, you don't have to digest it. It's a straight hit, which is how it affects you, and you get the pleasure. But at the same time, there are calories going with it.
Yeah. Just a reminder for people on Facebook Live watching us here, we're talking about alcohol consumption. is one glass a day okay? Is it not? Is it bad for you? Not good for you? We're getting mixed messages. But I'm with Dr. Peter Selby here from CAMH in Toronto talking about alcohol abuse, alcohol consumption. We have someone who's asking, this is, I don't know if you can answer this. This is kind of a funny question. Which is worse, one beer every day for 7 days or 7 beers one day a week?
We often say spread it out over the week rather than binging. Binges are worse for us because here's with alcohol, our body can metabolize 1 drink per hour on average. So if you load yourself up with 7 drinks, your body has to get those 7 drinks, and it'll take 7 hours on average to get out. And which is why some people who do this go on, and I've seen patients like this who get into trouble. They go out on a night of drinking, they drink 7 drinks, they go to bed, or 8 drinks and they go to bed, and then they wake up at 6 in the morning and get behind the wheel of the car. Their blood alcohol is still above the legal limit.
I think a lot of people don't realize that.
People don't realize this. And also your body has, because it overrides the natural systems, you start creating all these toxins, which is why you end up with the hangover and all this, these chemicals that form in your brain hurt you. Whereas when you're drinking in a slow fashion, not gulping and not with the intention of getting wasted, then your body has that time to deal with that drink of alcohol. You're still getting the benefit and the pleasure and enhancement of your social interaction, but it's not causing you that. So it's better to spread it out over the week.
Yeah, than the binge drinking.
Lila
Bell is, and this is kind of, I think we were talking about this before, is that how does drinking affect someone with heart disease?
That's a great question. We've heard a lot of the hype about drinking alcohol for, it's good for your heart and it'll help your heart. And some of that, and it was red wine for a while, but it's alcohol. And again, it benefits people who have multiple risk factors, possibly middle-aged men who have a high risk of heart disease, and it might benefit that population. But certainly, it's probably you need just 1 standard drink every other day. What people don't realize is how much alcohol has a role to play, not so much in preventing heart attacks, but actually causing people to end up with what we call arrhythmias, where your heart rhythm goes off. Atrial fibrillation is a big common one, and it's associated with drinking alcohol. The more alcohol you drink, the worse it is for your heart. So all these rhythm disturbances that we see can be caused by alcohol. And then for some people, alcohol can also cause weakening of the heart muscle, something called a myopathy, alcoholic myopathy. So you put that all together, all in all, alcohol probably causes more harm to your heart than good.
Oh, it's so interesting, because there were so many studies at one point. A glass of wine was a good.
So again, yeah, and I think by the end of this, everybody's going to say they need a drink because all I'm giving them is bad news. Because it's so inbuilt into the culture, right?
Yes.
Alcohol consumption. And, we shouldn't hit alcohol too bad. There was a time where alcohol had a role in society because it made water drinkable. Because it was safer than drinking water in most cities. Now we have water that at least is not going to kill you and not make you sick. So alcohol through history has had a role, but what it didn't have a role is in getting people intoxicated all the time in dangerous situations. And now you start and drinking alcohol all the time, every day, or in these non-normative ways that is now causing people more harm than good.
Yeah. It's the moderation again is the key.
That's right.
Armand Lefar on Facebook is it true, as we see on social media, that even 1 glass of wine or beer will shorten your life?
Look, it's all about risks, and when we look at this, it's these things that are associated. But don't forget, when we do these studies, there are other factors that you may not have accounted for. I mean, did that person also smoke cigarettes? Did that person also suffer from poverty? All these other factors, like mostly they get age and sex distribution, but these other things that have been going on, we don't have those data. So I would say, if it is going to shorten your life, it's not going to, it's not going to be years or something like that if you have the 1 drink. Again, I think we have to deal with this with some sort of common sense as well. What is your overall life? It's not just about risk avoidance, because if you only avoided risk, you wouldn't do anything. And so what is a risk you're willing to tolerate before it becomes a problem for you?
Yeah.
And then as a society, we have to say, okay, we know that banning something completely is not helpful. That's why we're legalizing cannabis. We know it causes more harm by banning something. What you want is people to have use of something without causing the harm, but having the benefit, and whether that's social benefit, health benefit, some benefit.
We got a lot of specific questions here. You can see that people are really
thinking it.
They they really want to get some answers. Jeremy Schultz is asking, are there as many cardiovascular risks related to being a long-term beer drinker versus a long-term liquor drinker?
That's a great question. I don't think we know. What we do know is that obviously liquor is a much more concentrated form of alcohol, and what in general what has been looked at the studies, they look at the equivalence. So an ounce or half of liquor being equivalent to say 333 ml of beer or 5 ounces of wine, all have the same amount of alcohol, and so that's how we've looked at the equivalence around it. In terms of exposure, because that's the alcohol is similar across. So I don't think anybody has looked at it specifically in terms of whether these other parts of how spirits are versus fermented beverages like wine are any different. But you can certainly get more calories from beer than you would get from that ounce of liquor.
Really?
Right? Because it's different, because you've got malted barley and you've got some other ingredients, you've got more volume. You'll get more of the other stuff than you would get in a concentrated shot of gin or something.
Yeah. I think we could probably sort of end it on this note, and maybe on a positive note. I think your key message is everything in moderation.
Yep. Everything in moderation, and not just the amount, but where and how you drink it.
Where and how.
Where and how, right? If you look at most people who have motor vehicle accidents and drink driving, these are not people who have alcohol problems per se, right? These are not people who would be called alcoholic. We don't use that term anymore, but alcohol use disorders or addicted to alcohol. It's general people who drink too much and drink and then get behind the wheel of a car. That population, if you don't do that, you will reduce that harm to society.
Yeah.
Right? University starting Frosh Week, this alcohol poisoning goes on, giving people in that non-normative way, just giving them so much alcohol that can cause them significant alcohol poisoning, hospitalizations, or getting into dangerous situations like unprotected sex and injuries and falls. All of that needs to stop, right? Because that is not a normative way of using alcohol.
Right. It's again moderation.
It's the moderation. Yeah.
I really appreciate your time, and I think that we've sort of shared some valuable information to our audience here, and I thank you all who wrote in with your interesting questions. We were with Dr. Peter Selby at the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, speaking on alcohol abuse, good or bad. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have the clear.
We have the clear.
Okay.